We see this too often where the publicist is at odds with the criminal defense lawyer. The publicist is worrying about the brand and the sponsors and the bottom line. Let's keep it real. They want to give a statement. They want to get in front of everything. They want to say he's fully cooperating with the police, trying to save face, right? Trying to protect the money. And I could just see the criminal defense team like, what are you doing?
Call your first witness. I got Kenneth Willis. He bought his business, he gon' take it the distance. Listen, he giving gaming, believing high level represent. Call your first witness. Yeah, call your first witness.
Griff has been paid for this endorsement.
Where you at, beautiful people? How you living? How you doing? How life treating you? Welcome to another episode of Call Your First Witness. You already know, it's your boy K Will checking in. I hope you're enjoying this Thanksgiving season. I'm happy you're here with me. I'm excited. I'm ecstatic about today's show, y'all. I hope you're having a good time. I'm definitely having a great time, man. I know I'm not in the minority when I say, man, this is one of the favorite times of my year. And obviously spending time with family and friends, man. I don't know, man. Something about, and I know this is not what Thanksgiving is all about, but something about just, I don't know, chilling at the crib, or maybe, you know, a family member, man, and just eating all day, you know, watching football, good vibes, laughing, clowning, joking. You know what I mean? It's just a beautiful thing, man. And if you got a wife like me, man, a Haitian wife, ooh, when I tell you, she, you know, normally she's always doing her thing in the kitchen. Believe that. But for Thanksgiving, y'all, she reminds folks that there's levels to this. Let's just say that, man. But you know, she got that Haitian infusion immersed with that American tradition. You know what I mean? You got the turkey, yeah, you got the baked macaroni, you got the cranberry sauce, but you also gonna get some griot. You also gonna get some pickles, right? You gonna get some dirigeon, right? You know, folks identify that as black rice with shrimp in it, but you gotta get it right. I'm talking about delicious Haitian cuisine, man. I'm talking about Russian salad, right? I know when you hear that, you're like, how is that a Haitian dish? But Haitians, they got their own little twist to it. You know what I mean? It kind of look like potato salad, but it don't, because it's pink. You got the beets, you got the peas, you got the onions mixed in there, chopped carrots. Y'all, I'm telling y'all. So yeah, if you didn't know, my wife's Haitian, and I just enjoy their culture. And it's just great to have their culture immersed with, you know, the New Orleans culture, New Orleans cuisine. But, you know, you got the American Thanksgiving traditions in the kitchen going on as well. So it's just a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But what we got on today's docket, what we going to talk about? What's hot? What's urgent? What's buzzing in the news? Y'all, it is September 9th, 2025. We are in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're at an establishment called the Fillmore. A young man by the name of David Anthony Burke is performing. He goes by David, or D4, or D4VD. He is a young singer, a young star on the rise. He started off as a gamer. His inspiration was actually video games. He would put videos on his YouTube page of one of his favorite games, Fortnite. And in his montage, he would have songs of other artists. And he would get notices of copyright strikes, basically informing him to cease and desist because it was a copyright infringement. It's being said, his mother said, son, rather than using other folks' music, why don't you create your own? And ladies and gentlemen, this was the start of his music career. Yes, he created songs, wrote them, sang them, released them on TikTok, grew, accelerated growth. Followers after followers after followers. To this day, he's close to 4 million followers. The fact that I never heard of him before this subject matter means nothing. He is a star on the rise. One of his songs you'll learn, you probably know, is called Romantic Homicide. It's under a lot of scrutiny today, and soon, if you do not already know, you'll learn why. Now, David is at his concert. He's in Minneapolis. There's a lot of fans present there. He has his management team there. He, of course, has his band there. His sponsors are there. And yet again, he's there to give a great show. And he performs. But at some point, ladies and gentlemen, his management team gets notice that there is a pending investigation. And the investigation requires his team, his publicists, his agents, his representatives, and of course, David himself to be alarmed. Yes, David's management team is in contact with LAPD, and they become aware that a corpse was found in a Tesla registered to David. And ladies and gentlemen, David's team, his managers, his publicists, his fans, even his band, and of course David, all arrive at the harsh reality that the show is over. Can I break it down? So listen, y'all, I just went in opening statement mode right quick. Forgive me for that. You know what I mean? Sometimes I feel like I'm in front of a jury. But real talk, this is a very interesting case. You're getting bits and pieces about it. You're hearing about it in the news. And I think at this stage, it's probably going to be 5 times bigger in the next, I don't know, couple of weeks. It's unfortunate. Let's start by saying that we have a 14-year-old female by the name of Celeste Rivas Hernandez dead. I'm not going to act like, you know, some of the things you hear in the accounts that's been given about the nature and the circumstances surrounding how LAPD found her body is, you know, it's hard to talk about. And even me as a criminal defense attorney, seeing so many gory pictures and footage of lifeless human beings, right? Seeing this for years, I'm not going to sit up here and act like I'm desensitized to this kind of material. And obviously, when we're talking about a child, a 14-year-old child, she would have been 15 at this point, it's even harder to talk about. So we have that situation going on, and according to LAPD, she was found in a Tesla registered to David. Now, this in and of itself is enough to be alarmed. This in and of itself is problematic, obviously, for David and his team, and they have to deal with it. And so immediately, if we go back to September 9th in Minneapolis, I believe that was his last show. He was on tour. The name of the tour was called Withered World Tour, right? That came to a screeching halt, shut it down. It's over, right? LAPD just found a dead body in a car that's registered to you. That's a wrap. And so this show was, David, listen, from what I realized, he was a rising star. Oh, he is a rising star, right? And so he was on tour here in North America as well as Europe. So dude was going to be busy. And obviously it's a lot of money involved here in terms of his exposure, his sponsorships, record deals, all that. And so you got a situation going on where y'all out the gate, I cringe because somebody got to his publicist. And look, y'all, the information that I'm getting, this thing is fluid. I don't have all the information. Nobody's been arrested. Nobody's been charged. David is currently a suspect, and we discovered that there's another suspect involved. Right now, LAPD is calling this an investigation of a death, right? And of course, they're looking at it as a potential murder, right? At this point, I know they have their theories. They just got to make sure their theories are supported by evidence and facts, and don't find themselves in a situation that we see a lot where they twist the evidence to support their theories. That's where the injustice lies, right? And so certainly, like I said, we're getting information bit by bit. You got to understand we in LA, right? And so LA, you got sources, you got leaks, you got folks getting information from all kind of places. And LAPD, they trying to hold their information close to their vest, right? Because they don't want to tip their hand in terms of letting folks know, particularly suspects. They don't need them to know what information they got. Y'all be surprised how perpetrators are just as much, if not more, interested in what the police is finding as it's happening in real time more than anybody else. I've been in cases where law enforcement would do a search warrant of my client's phone, and they discovered that the client was doing searches on the internet from news networks while the investigation was ongoing. Now, that's not shocking, that's not surprising, but the next step is when the DA take that information, the findings from the phone records, and submit it as State Exhibit 52 to show the defendant's criminal culpability, right? Like that's on a whole different level. So law enforcement knows they got to keep this close to the vest. But what's happening is information is being leaked, right? Again, we in LA. It was initially said that the body was found decomposed. Celeste, according to law enforcement, may have died a few weeks prior to them finding the body on September 5th in the trunk or the front, because we're talking about a Tesla, in a bag. Law enforcement said, look, based on the nature of the body, it appears that Celeste died a few weeks prior. Now, you got to understand, these are law enforcement saying this. This is not scientific evidence, forensic evidence. This is simply law enforcement. And certainly, they can use their lay opinion, their experience, and surmise, but they really have to defer to the medical examiner. That's the doctor, that's the pathologist, that's the person who assesses the body and gives an autopsy report, and they'll be able to determine, if they can, the manner and cause of death. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But law enforcement is initially looking at this and saying, look, we got preliminary findings from the medical examiner that the body was significantly decomposed. All right? But at this particular moment, the medical examiner is conducting tests to determine the manner and cause of death, right? And they also would like to conduct a toxicology analysis. All right. Now, why is this important? Of course, for all the obvious reasons, LAPD is trying to connect the dots, trying to figure out what happened. But information is being leaked because it started off as a severely decomposed body. And then what's being disclosed in the media is the body was dismembered. The body was decapitated, right? I don't know how true this is, but TMZ is reporting this. You can say what you want about TMZ. It's the tabloids. Some of that stuff is fabricated. Man, we already know TMZ got sources. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they'll drop a bag on folks to get that information, right? You do know that. You You probably don't need me to tell you that. And so this information is being leaked. Law enforcement, LAPD, like, hold up. How could this come out? And so that came out over the weekend. So what you heard early in the week is now the medical examiner received an order from the court pretty much saying whatever your findings are as it relates to manner of death, as it relates to cause of death, any information that you have regarding your findings cannot be disclosed. And so, okay, you like, I don't know why that was necessary, but it appears that LAPD triggered that. And so the medical examiner on their website, you get a statement from the medical examiner. The medical examiner said, listen, you don't see this kind of stuff where we are forbidden to disclose the information as it relates to the autopsy report. You don't see this kind of information in any other investigation where we have essentially a gag order where we can't even disclose this information to the public. Medical examiner is basically saying, listen, we are a public entity, right? We disclose this information in the interest of full transparency. And so what you see is the medical examiner sort of at odds with LAPD. And so it just kind of gives you a unique perspective of how the medical examiner and LAPD doesn't appear to be on the same page. And the medical examiner is a bit upset with the way this was handled in terms of LAPD getting an order to cease any information from being disseminated to the public. Medical examiner ain't having it. They like, look, we're going to disclose this information, obviously because it's a court order, but basically this ain't our doing. And so it makes you really think about LAPD, because I don't hear this kind of stuff. I'm not going to lie. I don't hear this in Louisiana. I don't hear this kind of strife between these two entities. You would think they would sort of be working lockstep together, right? Yes, there are independent agencies, the medical examiner, the coroner's office, as well as the local police department, but you don't really necessarily hear them being at odds. So, but we in LA, right? I can't tell you much about what goes on in LA. I can tell you a little bit about Louisiana, LA, but not Los Angeles, LA, right? But it kind of tells you, listen, when you in a town where media is big, and we talking about Hollywood, we talking about the dissemination of information, you're talking about probably when things happen in that city or in that metro area in terms of information, in terms of news, we're talking about stuff normally is 10x just because of that international city. And so it sounds like the examiner is sort of political in these statements by saying, look, if you don't get this information right then and there, don't blame me. You know, that just sounded a little political. It's a side note. It's really not the meat and potatoes of this investigation, but I just found that interesting, and I'm gonna continue to pay close attention to that aspect of the investigation because it is interesting. But can we talk about right now what's going on with David's team? What are they doing? Well, not a whole lot. As I stated, the show is over. Tours are canceled. No engagement on social media, especially David, right? Now, this is not surprising. After all, a dead body was found in a car that is said to be registered to him, right? But what I found interesting, and this is the part that makes me cringe as a criminal defense lawyer, there are several reports out there that indicate David's publicist gave a statement to the media. This happened around the time when the information first came out, somewhere soon after September 9th, right? And his publicist says something interesting to the effect of, we are aware of the situation. David is fully cooperating. I was like, what? Wait. Fully cooperating? You mean to tell me we got a Tesla that's registered to David? We have a female identified as Celeste, whom on various accounts, to be specific, her own brother said she was dating a person by the name of David, a singer, right? Her body is found in a Tesla registered to David, right? The vehicle was initially found in close proximity to a house that David was living in Hollywood Hills, right? And so, according to several accounts, the car was left there abandoned. Neighbors reported the vehicle abandoned. A tow trucking company came and impounded the vehicle. And the workers where the truck was towed to, they like, listen, man, it's a foul odor coming from this vehicle, right? And so you got these things happening, but you have David's publicist saying David is fully cooperating with law enforcement. Y'all, we see this too often where the publicist is at odds with the criminal defense lawyer. It's no secret that right now David is lawyered up. It's no secret that David's legal team, and when I say legal, let me be specific, his criminal defense lawyer, or lawyers plural, are advising him that you cannot say anything as it relates to this investigation, period. But you have the publicist out the gate saying he's fully cooperating. Now, there are other reports that LAPD is saying, no, he's not, right? This is a situation where I see too often, whenever we're talking about a public figure, a star, somebody famous, and they're under investigation, you got that publicist, right? The publicist is worrying about the brand and the sponsors and the bottom line. Let's keep it real. And so they want to give a statement. They want to get in front of everything. They want to say he's fully cooperating with the police, trying to save face, right? Trying to protect the money. And I could just see the criminal defense team like, what are you doing? What do you mean he's fully cooperating? And so you got a situation where it's like, y'all got to be on the same page, because it is a fundamental right that David has that he doesn't have to say anything. He does not have to cooperate. I understand, Mr. or Mrs. Publicist, you may think if he doesn't say anything, if he doesn't cooperate, folks going to think he's guilty. Listen, let me tell you something. Folks already convicted your client. Oh, he's already done in a court of public opinion. Case is closed. They on to the sentencing phase. Yeah, that trial been happened in a court of public opinion. Ain't nothing you could do about it. And guess what, Mr. or Mrs. Publicist? Ain't nothing you could tell the police that's going to convince them otherwise either. Do you not understand that they found Celeste's body in a vehicle registered to David? And so whatever cooperation you think he needs to give law enforcement, it's not going to help his case. That's why, y'all, and we hear this all the time. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you. We hear this so often, almost to the point where it loses its value, because people don't quite understand. You can talk yourself into a conviction. Whether you are innocent or not, we don't know what happened. We're getting information bit by bit. And as I always remind you, what's going to come out in court documents, and evidence itself may be different than what's being reported in the news. And so by David talking, it doesn't do him any justice. By him cooperating doesn't mean a hill of beans. Law enforcement already have their theory, right? All they need is David to help sink him even more. Now, again, we're not at David has not been charged. As I stated, there is another suspect. We don't even know if that person is a male or female at this point. And so LAPD holding that close to the vest, that information probably going to get out before LAPD wants it to get out. All right. It's just a matter of time. Drip, drop. But again, now it's like, oh, I thought he was cooperating. What is he doing now? Did he give a statement? Did he not give a statement? How about let's just keep it clean and he's not going to say anything? Law enforcement, you want to talk to my client, you got to talk to me. But all this potential talk about David, if you come and sit down and talk to us, I can promise you it'll go a long ways. As defense lawyers, we hear that all the time. Nah, we good. Call us, Mr. Officer, so I can respectfully tell you to kick rocks. That's one of those things where, again, you have to be careful about giving statements. How you look and what people going to think, that's over with. Your day will come. If this thing goes to court, your day will come. And so all the client has to do is trust his legal team, but that legal team, that criminal defense team, and the rest of the management team, the publicist, everybody got to be on the same page. No statements. And I think at this point, they're clear now, but that needed to be clear out the gate. And like I said, you see that a lot. How about we just not talk? But this case, y'all, it's interesting because, as I stated, David came out with a song called Romantic Homicide. Now, there was a time when that song was hot. I think back in 2022 on TikTok, I mean, it just soared in terms of viewership, likes, his followers increased. And, it was a beautiful song to many people, right? It's crazy because now, currently, this song is under a lot of scrutiny. Now a lot more folks are listening to it. On Spotify, I believe it's like one of the top 15 songs in terms of streaming volume. So folks looking at this song, which was created in 2022, entitled Romantic Homicide, and they fast forwarding it up until now, and they like, what was he talking about? Now, listen, y'all know I'm a proponent of art. I'm a proponent of expression. I heavily covered the Young Thug case. I mean, go back to season 1 if you haven't already. I dived into that case from the beginning, in the middle, all the way to the end. And so I could see a prosecutor. Could you imagine Adrian Love? Those of you who don't know who Adrian Love is, Adrian Love was the lead prosecutor who tried the Young Thug RICO case. And she was putting all Young Thug's music on trial to try to prove his criminal culpability, as well as the other individuals who were on trial. I could see Adrian Love, or a prosecutor with Adrian's same mindset, salivating by looking at that song, reading the lyrics. And it sounds bizarre. Like, how could you bring in something that was created years ago as evidence? I would think the same thing, but I've seen a lot of bizarre things in court. And I've seen a lot of ways where prosecutors try to justify why that's relevant to a particular homicide. I know I'm kind of jumping the gun, but if you think prosecutors in LAPD didn't look at that video just to see if they could get some clues, everything's fair game to them. And so that makes this case even more interesting, because I read something where David made a song and entitled it Celeste. I don't know how true that is. I'm trying to vet my sources. I'm not just getting it from anybody. I'm reading this from reputable sources, reputable media outlets. And so folks are trying to connect the dots. We have information that leads us to believe that there was some type of relationship involving Celeste and David. It's no secret that in and of itself have law enforcement laser focused at David and his whereabouts dating back to the beginning of this year, the summer. There is discussion about a trip that David took to Santa Barbara, California. And this happened sometime in the spring of this year. And law enforcement, they're honing in on that trip because they're trying to figure out where was his whereabouts, whether or not Celeste was with him, what happened at that trip. Can we get any footage of Celeste being at that trip when they came back? I mean, you can imagine how many search warrants were issued in connection with this case. I'm talking wherever he was said to be in Santa Barbara, California, you better believe LAPD on that. We talking, at this point, probably 100 search warrants were issued. I think I'm being conservative, probably a lot more than that. I'm talking search warrants on his phone, the Tesla. Let's talk about the Tesla. Right? I mean, y'all, what I know about a Tesla, I don't know, man. Y'all remember that show, How to Get Away with Murder? Y'all, I don't know, man. Viola Davis's character, man, I don't know if I'm going out on a limb by saying I think she would have advised against that, man. Like, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but bruh, and I'm not trying to convict somebody, but something about a Tesla and a corpse just don't mix together. I'm sorry, and we can't presume criminals are acting rational, but I'm sorry. We talking cameras, we talking high tech technology, and we already know, we can only imagine how many warrants went to Tesla Corporation, you know, getting information, getting videos and pinpointing locations where that Tesla went. And so when more information come out, because it's a matter of time. I mean, it is a matter of time. Let's just keep it real. When information come out, we can expect them having a PowerPoint presentation of the whereabouts of that Tesla, the whereabouts of David, the whereabouts of Celeste, this other suspect. I mean, they gonna have that information lined up. They went to the house in Hollywood Hills where David was living prior to him going on tour. And they coming out of the house with all kind of items, all kind of materials. So it's a lot of stuff, y'all, that I anticipate coming from this investigation. Like I said, I think law enforcement, they just trying to connect the dots. But there's a big missing piece of evidence, or multiple pieces of evidence that's missing, and it's the manner and cause of death. So when we talking about manner of death, we're talking about the classification of the death, right? The question is, was it natural? Was it an accident? Was it a suicide? Was it a homicide? Or, which I think may be relevant here, is it undetermined, right? And so undetermined essentially speaks for itself. The medical examiner can't tell you one way or the other. And so when we're talking about cause, the difference here is, okay, this person is dead. What caused this person's death? Was it a gunshot wound? Was it a stabbing? Was it a heart attack? And so from that, you have what caused it, and then you have the manner. And so we have a severely decomposed body, leaks that came from, we don't know who, but folks got reason to believe leaks came from the medical examiner's office, that the body was dismembered and decapitated. Now, that could have came from them. That could have just came from anywhere. We speculating at the time, but LAPD has reason to believe that that came from the medical examiner's office. And that's why they wanted to shut it down. But we have a void right now in law enforcement's investigation. They obviously have to defer to the forensic experts in terms of when Celeste died, what's her manner of death, and what's the cause of death. And so I wouldn't be surprised just by so far the nature in which people have described Celeste's body. I wouldn't be surprised if the medical examiner came back and said the manner of death is undetermined. Right? I've seen this before. I've had this in cases that I've tried. Right? And let me tell you something. If the state is having problems of determining the manner of death, they got some problems. Right? Because now you're having difficulty establishing whether or not this was a homicide, whether or not it was a suicide, whether or not it was an accident. And listen, y'all, let me tell you something. I talked about the court of public opinion. I talked about how it doesn't look good in terms of the body being found in David's car. But let me pause for a second and put on my defense lawyer hat and let you know that ain't enough to charge somebody, as we already see, and it's certainly not enough to convict someone. Right? It looks bad. The law is profound and poetic and says David is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but most people already convicted him. But what we have so far, LAPD, no, that's not enough to even present to a judge to get probable cause for his arrest, irrespective of what they think happened. They got to defer to the medical examiners. I had a case where my client was at his home with his girlfriend. He hears a gunshot. He finds his girlfriend, which was white. I just need to add that little piece of fact. And my client is black. But he finds his girlfriend covered in blood. He just heard a gunshot fired, and she's non-responsive. The first thing he does is he calls his dad. All right? He doesn't call 911. He doesn't call authorities. He calls his dad, and he tells his dad, which lives next door to him, come and see about my baby. And so the dad comes. The dad calls 911. The dad is trying to resuscitate the young lady with 911 on the phone. Then you got law enforcement on their way to the residence, and guess what happens? My client commits a disappearing act. He done got ghosts. And so this behavior, many people would think this is criminal behavior. This is indicative of his culpability as it relates to a homicide. He must have shot his girlfriend. So, long story short, the medical examiner is looking at all the findings, looking at the evidence, is evaluating the body and says, listen, we got a firearm, we have blood, we have a corpse, we got the cause of death, a gunshot wound. She had a gunshot wound to her temple, but was unable to determine whether or not the manner of death was an accident, was a suicide, or a homicide. This is the person who initially examined the body. This is the person we rely on. This is the expert. This is the pathologist. And he puts on the autopsy report in the death certificate undetermined. That was going to be defense exhibit 1 that we were going to show to the jury, that the manner of death, whether or not this was self-inflicted by way of an accident or a suicide, or whether or not this is homicide, is undetermined. That was going to be our exhibit to establish reasonable doubt out the gate, because further evidence established that there was the young lady's DNA on the trigger of the firearm. The stippling in the suit on her forehead, those black dots from the gunshot residue, gives us reason to believe the shot was of close range. More evidence supported that this shot could have been self-inflicted. And so the case even took a turn for the worse, because initially it started off as an undetermined death. No one was charged. The deceased family hired their own forensic pathologist. That forensic pathologist came in, did an assessment, never looked at the body, only relied on pictures and said, oh yeah, this was a homicide. The family goes and take that file and put it on the DA's desk and say, this was a homicide. You need to charge my client. What my client realized initially, remember I told you he ran? What he thought, what he feared, that folks were going to think it was him. You better believe that's exactly what happened. So we had to go and hire our ballistics expert and an expert in blood spatter analysis. And so what I'm telling you is when you have this void and you can't differentiate between whether or not this was an accident or a homicide, you got some problems. And I talked about this briefly, and I didn't go in depth with this when I covered the Kyron Lacey case. That's episode 1, season 2. I talked about the combination package of hit and run and negligent homicide. And you see that combination together because a lot of times you may have an individual who caused an accident, which may not be criminal in nature, but they left the scene and committed hit and run. And that behavior, if you're not careful, may be demonstrated as they committed the crime. It shows their criminal intent. But really what you're showing is panic. And so we do not know what happened. I'm not here acting like I know what happened, but if all you have, respectfully, is a body in a car registered to David, and you can't establish the manner of death, and you can't make out whether or not this was an accident, you got some problems. And so that's why David is being investigated in terms of what role did he play in how the body got in the vehicle. Now, obviously, they looking at everything, but they got to tie him to that. And if all you have is proof that the body was placed in the bag, even if you got video of him putting the body in the bag, again, I don't know, it doesn't prove that he's responsible for the death of Celeste. It doesn't show how Celeste died. It clearly doesn't give a timeline of when. And so you still have void answers. And so this forensic analysis from the medical examiner obviously is important. They're trying to do a toxicology report that will help determine what Celeste ingested. Was she under the influence of drugs, which may be the cause of her death? We don't know. And if it's too late because the body is so degraded to determine that, that's a gaping hole that LAPD got to deal with. And so, y'all, this is going to be a very interesting case. I'm not going out on a limb by saying more than likely David is going to be arrested for murder and whomever the other suspect is. But so far, we know it's not enough to charge David with anything. And so, yes, LAPD, I'm sure they're being very methodical. They're getting their material back from all these search warrants, and they trying to put everything together. And so, y'all, I'm going to be covering this one. Like I said, you're going to be hearing a lot more regarding this case. I'm telling y'all. But look, y'all, that's my time. I hope y'all enjoyed today's show. Glad you spent some time with me. And let me say this, man. I would be remiss by not mentioning this in this Thanksgiving season. I just want to let y'all know I am thankful just for you all, right? However corny that may sound, man, this is from the bottom of my heart when I reflect on, you know, taking this moment, this Thanksgiving season, just to reflect on the things I'm grateful for. Is certainly also you all taking the time out. I don't know what you're doing. You know, I don't know whether you're cleaning your house, cutting your grass, you know, on a long commute, but you know, you taking the time out to listen to me. You give me the fuel to keep on going. You know, some of y'all been rocking with me since day one. You know, I dropped this podcast on February 22nd, 2024. Not trying to suggest that that's a long time, but I'm grateful for you. Keep tuning in, keep sharing my videos, telling folks about this podcast, man. Again, I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Until next time, see y'all later. Love.
Call your first witness. I got Kenneth Willis. He bought his business, he gon' take it the distance. Listen, he giving gaming, believe in high level representation. Call your first witness. Yeah, call your first witness.
Griff has been paid for this endorsement.